The Supreme Court delivers a blow to the Trump administration when it comes to immigration and dreamers. Florida is slowly becoming the next epicenter of COVID-19 in the United States. And Love, Hate, 8, the face mask edition. Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Friday, June 19th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hey, Carlo.
Happy Friday, Jill. How are you?
Good. Long week. How are you doing?
It has been a long week. You know, it's Father's Day on Sunday. You guys doing anything? This isn't Mike's first Father's Day, is it?
No.
No, it would have been.
Second.
Yeah, it would have been last year, right? Yeah. Well, don't forget to call your dads this weekend, everybody, if you're not going to see them.
Absolutely. Very good reminder. It's being a parent during this time period has been definitely a challenge. So kudos to everyone out there. All right, let's start with some news, Carlo, out of the Supreme Court regarding immigration. The court dealt another blow to the Trump administration, ruling that the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or the DACA program, can stand, at least for now. So it was a 5-4 decision. Chief Justice Roberts again joined the liberal wing. He found that the government did not legally justify its decision to terminate the order. DACA was put in place through an executive order back in 2012 by President Obama, and it let about 800,000 immigrants known as dreamers who were brought to the U.S. By their parents in most cases as children. It lets them stay and work without the fear of being deported.
Yeah, so this wasn't a landmark decision in the way that the one earlier this week really set a precedent. This was really the much more procedural. Basically, the court telling the Trump administration that their work was too sloppy here, which has always been the case in how this White House has tried to execute its immigration policies. Remember how many times they had to go back to the drawing board to get that travel ban passed to a place where it wasn't like completely unconstitutional. So when you have these procedural rulings, it's hard to extrapolate much in terms of precedent. Though that being said, I mean it is undoubtedly a win for people who support the dreamers and for the dreamers themselves who have been living and working in this country, and in most cases it's the only country that they know. But it's one thing that is interesting is John Roberts, like you said, once again joining with the liberals. He is now essentially the court swing vote. He was brought on as a stalwart conservative by President Bush back in the mid-aughts, and he between this and Obamacare and the ruling earlier this week on transgender rights, he is really becoming sort of the Anthony Kennedy of this court, which is fascinating.
I mean, look, we have to realize also, so President Trump basically slammed the decision saying, the court's so political and this is why we need to reelect him to get more conservative judges. I'm glad you mentioned that. Roberts was appointed by George W. Bush. And not only that, Neil Gorsuch was his appointee. He was the one who ruled on the decision earlier this week. That went against the Trump administration. So I think it speaks to the checks and balances in this country. There's a reason we have 3 branches of government. And
right.
You think that, you think based on somebody's record, how they're going to vote. And usually it turns out to be the case. But these justices are weighing each decision, and they don't do a lot of interviews. So you don't totally know what's going on, in their heads behind the scenes. But I think it speaks to the system we have in place in this country.
Well, I think that's true. And I also think that I actually think that these 2 decisions are doing the Trump administration a favor, because both their policy on the I'm blanking on the decision from earlier this week. It was about
Carlo, so am I. I can't remember it.
It was only 3 days ago, right? It was about. Sorry, folks.
I don't know what it was. Was it voting
folks.
rights?
It was no. It was about it was worker discrimination. It was LGBT worker discrimination.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, folks.
Oh my God.
You get to see how the sausage is made here. But no, between that, which was an incredibly important decision, and this, I mean, these are two rulings that go, in the direction of public opinion, right? The Trump administration was outside of the mainstream on both DACA and LGBT worker discrimination. So frankly, in some ways, you could argue the Supreme Court is doing the Trump administration a favor by essentially being that way. Trump can be like, hey, the court, made their decision. It's not on me on these things that the public opinion is very much in a set way.
And doing Congress a favor, especially on the LGBTQ ruling from earlier this week. Because the argument on the other side was that it just was a congressional, like it should have, the argument was that this is something, the conservative judges said was that it should have been something that that was done by legislature.
Right.
I am so tired. I don't know what is wrong with us this morning. I'm sorry, everybody.
No. Which is also the case in this case, which is just like, it has to fall on the Congress to actually make these laws.
All right, let's talk about a little coronavirus, because as usual, a lot of headlines this morning. Florida reported its largest single day count since the pandemic started. Experts are warning that the state's demographics make it particularly worrisome if it becomes an epicenter. As the caseload also grows in California, the governor there, Gavin Newsom, has issued mandatory orders for residents to wear masks in most public settings. Bottom line here, Carlo, New York and the surrounding area was hit the hardest originally, took it seriously and crushed the virus. Okay. And almost everywhere else in the country, we are seeing massive, massive upticks. And if you want to know how much things have shifted, this is so interesting. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo now considering a quarantine for people coming from other parts of the country, like Florida.
Right. And it was the opposite a couple of months ago, remember? It never really made sense to me why Florida didn't get hit with an initial outbreak. Given that the demographics, right? The state is full of people who are at very high risk. It's also one of the most poorly managed states in the country. So I never really got. Hopefully it does. Hopefully it skates again, but it doesn't seem. It seems like it's finally sort of getting the.
One of the reasons, I'm just going to quickly interrupt you, Carlo.
Please.
Some experts have said that one of the reasons for Florida that they never got a huge uptick was they looked at cell phone data and they found that even though the state wasn't locked down, people were still locking themselves down. And also a lot of the decisions were made by local counties and local municipalities. And so you had the Miami area that shut down earlier. And just so it was one of those things. Also, at that point, more people were doing stuff outside. And we know that there's a lower risk of a transmission and infection outside. So that was sort of
that makes some sense. That makes some sense. I get that. Plus, now it's I think now like to my theory earlier this week, it's now getting to the place where it's like miserably hot in Florida, and I think more people are probably going to be inside in the air conditioning. Also, on that point, early data from the protests from a couple of weeks ago is showing that there is not a real and legitimate uptick in cases in any of these places that have seen major protests. The Black Lives Matter protests and the George Floyd protests from a couple of weeks ago, which suggests that masks and them being in outdoor settings made a big difference. Which again, Jill, is something that we've been saying, and it's also why this event that the president is holding to kick his re-election off in Tulsa tomorrow has like the makings of a major public health disaster. They're doing this in an arena. It's just it boggles the mind, I have to say.
I don't know why they just don't do it outdoors. That would seem to solve a lot of problems.
That's a great question. I don't know the answer because I think there's a football stadium in Tulsa. I think they have there's a university there, so they should just do it in the football stadium. But I don't know the answer. Also, I want to point out this story while we're talking about this. That to me is like the perfect distillation of where we are as a country. So the CEO of AMC Theaters, the big movie theater chain, he talks to Variety this morning, and he says that the company is not going to require moviegoers to wear masks because, quote, he doesn't want AMC to get drawn into a political controversy. So I'm quoting this guy now whose name is, his name is what is his name? Adam Aarons, I think. Sorry, we're out of it today. Anyway, this guy's the CEO of AMC, and this is his quote. This is his quote
Sorry.
to Variety. We thought it might be counterproductive if we force mask wearing on the people who believe strongly that it is not necessary. I mean, bravo. Just give this guy a medal. Give this guy a corporate leadership medal right now, because way to just have the dumbest possible take, sir. Like, it's only a political controversy if you treat it like a political controversy. It's not a political controversy. The science says masks make it harder to transmit the virus. It's that simple. Like, this is the kind of stuff that just makes me so upset. I'm sorry.
It's called science. I've been interviewing this week, especially on Cheddar, a lot of medical professionals just talking about the virus and what's going on and this uptick. And each one, to a person, has said the reason that the U.S. just can't get a handle on it is because of politics. It's the only country where we've really politicized a health issue.
I mean, imagine saying that, like, oh, we don't want to hurt people's feelings, in schools, because 26% of Americans believe that the sun revolves around the earth. So we're just gonna let them, like, that's something that doesn't. It's not true, right? It's not politically controversial.
And they also have it down. Not only does it help, like they know I don't know the actual number, but it's something like wearing a mask cuts your risk of infection by X%. I mean, there's studies that have looked at exactly the droplets that come out of your mouth and just how far they could possibly go. Carlo, I totally get kind of your frustration here with this. Let's talk a little bit about the a tech and political story. Facebook has removed dozens of ads from President Trump's re-election campaign that depicted a symbol once used by Nazis to label political prisoners in concentration camps. The ads included an inverted red triangle to warn against dangerous mobs of far-left groups. Facebook, which very rarely intercedes when it comes to political content, said that the ads violate its policy against hate speech.
Twitter also slapping a warning last night on a tweet from President Trump that showed one of these like MAGA memes that he posts. It was a video of two toddlers running down a sidewalk. The video was altered to make it look like it was a report on CNN with the chyron that said "racist baby, probably a Trump voter." So Twitter labeled that tweet as manipulated media, which is the first time they've tagged that particular label on a tweet by the president, which is obviously going to probably infuriate him today. I'm sure we'll be hearing more about this in the hours to come.
I want to talk briefly as well about what's happening with the real estate market right now. Mortgage rates are at historic lows, and more people are racing into the housing market, and they're looking at the burbs. Data from the real estate listing site Realtor.com shows that searches for suburban zip codes are up 13%. That's double the pace of growth in urban areas. It's a small piece of data, but it reinforces this growing belief that the pandemic has accelerated millennials' exodus from cities. Millennials are, of course, right now the largest home buying cohort.
This is a really interesting story, and it's a thing that's happening, and I'm curious where you stand on it. It's something that my wife and I are personally struggling with, right? This idea that, like, if the work from home thing becomes even partially like the way of the future, if you don't have to go into a big city, right? If you don't have to go into Midtown Manhattan 5 days a week, does it make sense to spend all of your money on living in an apartment in Brooklyn, for instance? And I'm very curious because I don't know if this is one of those stories that's just like a New York centric. But I'm very curious, and I want people to email us in other parts of this country if people are thinking about this sort of thing. And we're at the age, we're both in our mid upper 30s now. We're like, you get a little bit old, like you have a kid already. Like the idea of living in the city has less of a lure to it at this point, right? But I think that the pandemic has certainly accelerated that idea in a lot of people's heads. Right.
Well, that this is hitting home.
Well, yeah, right.
No pun intended, as I'm living in my in-laws, and we are permanently moving out here. It was a decision that we just made, that my husband
Right,
felt
there you
really
go.
strongly about. And yeah, I mean, it certainly accelerated our decision. We were going to be in the city for at least another few years, but the feeling was, considering what's going on, we had to do what was good for my daughter more than
Sure.
anything. And space is nice, right? Like if you have to be confined to your home and there's another lockdown, if you're able to get out in fresh air in a backyard, it's a really nice thing versus having to put on a mask. I could
Yeah.
tell you anecdotally, that I called a bunch of nursery schools, like twos programs is what they're called when they're two.
Mhm.
Um, I Yesterday I spoke to someone. She said all day long, every day, she gets calls from people like me who came out to the
Sure.
suburbs temporarily during the lockdown and have decided to stay. And she's like, and because I'm really struggling with it, and I, I have been crying my eyes out for the past few weeks, and that's not an exaggeration. I'm really sad about leaving the city, and I would stay. I ultimately have to do what's good for my family, but
Sure.
um, I think this is very real. My friend is a broker out in Westchester. She told me people are literally buying homes sight unseen.
Yeah,
She
my
said
parents,
she's never
my
been this busy.
that's amazing. My parents said the same thing. They said the houses go on the market in the town where I grew up, and they're on a day, not even.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, stuff is sitting on the market here in New York City. Um, yeah, I'm really curious. I don't know if it's just a New York phenomenon, but it is. And I mean, the knock-on effects of a trend like this are hard to overstate, right? If you don't, just taking New York as an example, just because we happen to live here, but like, if you have people leaving the city, the tax effects of that, what that means for the commercial real estate market. If you're a big company and you no longer need to have 1 million square feet of prime office space in Midtown because half your workforce is working from home, there's huge like tumbleweed effects from that, and it'll be one of the big stories of the next couple of years. I think that nobody really
Well,
knows how
Facebook
it's going to take out.
Facebook announced. Look, we know Twitter and Square have said that employees who want to work from home and can do it forever.
Yeah.
Those are two companies, and we know that the reason that's important is because policies that start with a lot of these big tech companies often go to other companies as well.
Right.
Facebook has said something similar, and they've said, people who look, they have to pay salaries that work for people who live in Silicon Valley, where real estate is just crazy expensive. So it's going to save them a ton of money. They said they're going to
Sure.
adjust people's salary, but someone could move. If they were living in a small house in Silicon Valley and they want to move closer to their families in Texas or wherever it
Right.
is, and it's going to save Facebook a ton of money because they're going to adjust their salary accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be really fascinating to watch, I have to say. No, I don't
The
know.
other the other flip of the coin, though, is I was talking to a friend of mine and I was saying, you could also see it going back to what it was like before. This time next year, if there is a vaccine, are we just going to all be back in the rat race of like the
Sure.
commute?
I
I
don't think
mean,
anybody
we'll
knows.
see.
I mean, look, again, back to New York City, just briefly. New York City was left for dead after 9/11. People were like, no one's ever going to live there again. No one's ever going to take the subway. No one's ever going to work in a skyscraper. And that wasn't the case. So nobody really knows the answer to these questions, but they're fascinating questions.
I would never underestimate New York City. It's just a question of um, whether I'm going to live there. Like for me, I'm
Right.
mourning New York City. I miss it. I actually see people's posts on social media, and I'm envious that the city's going to phase 2
Yep.
on Monday. That's huge, right? That's outdoor dining. My hair salon where I go is opening up, and I don't mean I'm concerned. Like I have no doubt personally that New York City is going to thrive, and I think that there is still an allure of cities, but it is interesting because the trend so flipped. It was the millennials who were all about city and urban living and didn't care
Yeah.
about having a big house and cars and those
Yeah, and
kind
then
of
we get
creature
old and
comforts.
we have kids, and it's just like our parents.
Okay.
Time, a tale as
Also,
old as time.
No, it really is. It's so fascinating, and the fact that even you, Carlo, are thinking about it, to me, you are so distinctly Brooklyn. The fact that even you guys are thinking about moving to the burbs tells you something.
Yeah, it does.
Today, by the way, is Juneteenth. It has taken on new meaning this year as the country reels from weeks of protests over racial injustice and the police killings of unarmed Black men. This holiday commemorates the abolition of slavery in the United States. It is a bit of a misnomer, though, because the actual thing that happened on this date in 1865 was simply that a Union general came to Texas to announce that slaves in the state had formally been emancipated months after the Civil War had officially ended and more than 2 years after Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's something I learned this week that I didn't know. Juneteenth has actually been a state holiday in Texas since 1980.
Wow.
Fascinating. Yeah, I didn't know that. I think that this will probably be a federal holiday this time next year. Kamala Harris actually just introduced legislation to do just that. We've seen, more states making this a thing. A bunch of companies now are doing it. So yeah, it's interesting to watch for sure, but an important day, especially this year.
Absolutely. All right, let's finish this up with a little bit of love, hate, eight. One thing that we love: a cute face mask and a cute, comfortable face mask.
Do you have like a go-to face mask? I just use the surgical ones.
Yeah, I think that those are the best. I do. I interviewed someone who makes, it's called Face It masks, and they make personalized branded face masks, and they sent me a Michigan one and a
Oh
Cheddar
God,
one as examples. So I
really?
wear those. Yeah.
Oh man, I should have.
I also
You should
don't
have
leave
brought
the
them on.
house, so I rarely
Yeah,
ever wear a
right.
face mask.
um, I, my wife has a bunch of like very cute, like I don't even know. I don't even know where she got them. Some website, but they're very like on brand for her. And I'm just wearing the reusable ones. But on that note, one thing that we hate, you can never hear what anyone is saying now because everyone's wearing these masks, especially when you have to go to like a grocery store or something. It's amazing how much it requires. I mean, I'm sure deaf people could tell you this, like, no kidding, dude. But how much you need to see people's mouths move to really like understand what they're saying and to understand like what their intention of what they're saying is. I found that to be really enlightening over these last few weeks. Also, has anyone figured out the foggy glasses problem? I don't wear glasses, but I've been wearing sunglasses lately, and you breathe into the mask and it fogs up the lenses of your glasses. It seems like that's a real issue that needs to be figured out.
I keep seeing on social media hacks for how to fix that, but
Yeah,
I don't wear glasses, so
uh, you,
I
you
don't
could make
know.
$1 billion right there.
I actually think the bigger problem is not necessarily not hearing people who are wearing face masks, but just missing their expressions. You can't
Yeah,
tell if someone's laughing, if they're smiling. It's so bizarre. And
right.
then I was out the other day, and a friend of mine, was wearing a face mask with sunglasses. It was like, why even bother? I mean, I can't see you. I don't know what's going on. Let's just FaceTime or something.
But a buddy of mine was talking the other day about how he wears like this red bandana as his mask, and he was like
That's what my
he was
husband
like,
does.
yeah, he was like in the bank the other day wearing like a hoodie, sunglasses, and a red bandana. He was like, any other time you would be like, this guy is about to stick this place up. But it's just just the world we live in now.
It is the world we live in. Okay, one thing that we ate, Carlo. What do you have?
Okay, well, mine for the newsletter this week was PB&J on white, just because it's just a classic sandwich. But I actually want to change it because what I've been snacking on in the last couple days is fresh cantaloupe, and I feel like cantaloupe really gets a bad rap. I feel like it's like whenever you have like a fruit platter at like an event or something, cantaloupe's always the fruit that gets left on there. And I think that we should change that as a country because
Have we
cantaloupe
ever
is.
talked about this?
No, I don't think so. Have we? It's possible at this point.
No, it is. I'm laughing because this is a debate that my husband and I have all the time because he loves cantaloupe, and I'm like, that it's a filler fruit. It's the fruit that they
It's
throw
not
in
a
with
filler
the
fruit.
honeydew on the bottom of
Oh,
the
so
fruit
wrong about that.
salad. And I've changed my opinion on it. I've learned to really like cantaloupe and
And it,
honeydew for that matter.
I think when cantaloupe is good and it's not too like slimy, it's just oh,
I'm with you. Okay. We will leave it there. Carlo, Have a great weekend. Did you want to promote the YouTube for us?
Oh yeah,
one more time?
youtube.com/Cheddar Live. You can watch these absolute train wrecks. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, check it out. Check out the YouTube page if you want. But if you don't, we'll be back on Monday right here.
And we should really do the behind the scenes for everyone wanting to know how this Friday started. I had a complete blurry screen to the point where no one could see. It looked like I was in a sauna. And it turned out I had to just wipe down my camera, my phone with a tissue.
Sometimes you just gotta. Everything just sort of needs a big wipe down.
All right, that's what you need to know for Friday, June 19th.
Have a great weekend, everyone, and happy Father's Day, Dad.